My name is Martin Gordon Mubanjizi, a data scientist, but also head of office of UN Global Pulse. And UN Global Pulse is the UN Secretary General's innovation hub. And it has offices here in Uganda, in Finland, in Indonesia, but also in the US. And we work around 5 capabilities: the capability of data, the capability of innovation, digital behavior science, and strategic foresight. Yeah, so today, just to introduce our session, we know that we constantly generate data trails as we engage with various government, private sector, civil society, but also academic institutions. And each interaction with these entities adds new data points. And so with the time, there is a lot of data that is being collected about us in these institutions. And some of the data that we offer are the names, gender, date of birth, NIN, passport numbers, phone numbers. Sometimes you're asked for your religion, marital status, next of kin. Sometimes they can even ask you the number of kids that you have. But we know that this data that is collected by these institutions is very useful in their operations, and data scientists in these institutions do build machine learning and artificial intelligence models to derive value. Value by creating new products and services, by detecting fraud, and by improving customer experience, and more, and many more other value that can be generated from this. And so this data, and also this data that is collected by these institutions could be very useful by other institutions outside these institutions, and therefore this calls for responsible data sharing. So although data offers immense benefits, it also poses potential for misuse, which could lead to individual harms, but also to group harms. And therefore, it calls for appropriate, reasonable, and robust technical and organizational measures to ensure that there is no unlawful access to data. So today we have Mr. Beka Birikuja, the Manager of Compliance and Investigations at the Personal Data Protection Office. And I'm going to start by asking him some questions, and then I'll also allow people in the audience to interact with him, ask him those burning questions around data privacy, ethical AI, but also the intersection of these topics. So maybe Beka, I'll just allow you to just say more about yourself before we begin.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Martin. I keep forgetting to add the doctor.
No, it's not. Martin is
but definitely. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
So as introduced, my name is Beka Birikuja. I'm the Manager of Compliance and Investigations, the Personal Data Protection Office. The work that I do, it involves making sure that those that are collecting personal data, be it government, private entities, or even individuals, comply with the law. One, by ensuring that they are registered, they have mechanisms in place to ensure that this data is used responsibly in accordance with the law. But those that fail to do so, my role also entails ensuring that they are brought to book. We have an in-house police officer that we conduct investigations with, gather the evidence. The director of public prosecutions also gave us a prosecutor that we work with, that where we have gathered sufficient evidence and there is actually an offense that is shown, then we prosecute them in courts of law. So basically, that's the type of work that I do. and who I am.
So thanks, Becca. So tell us more about the Data Protection Office and where does it derive its mandate?
Thank you, Dr. Martin. The Personal Data Protection Office is a government office, which means it's established by law, the Data Protection and Privacy Act, that was passed in 2019. So this office, it has a number of functions. One of the reasons as to why it was established is to implement and enforce that particular law. How by mirroring sort of what I've already talked about earlier, that those that collect and use this data do it responsibly. So it registers all of them. The law requires that as a legal obligation, but also the office ensures that these people that even new individuals from whom your data is collected will receive complaints about the misuse. So making sure that these complaints are handled and concluded, but we also collaborate with other actors within the data protection space, development partners, as I've been with Global Pulse Lab, but also other agencies. We collaborate such as the Kenyan office and also the East African Secretariat to ensure that even if you're outside Uganda and you're collecting and using personal data of Ugandans, we have ways through which we can assist the individuals. And then we also offer a lot of guidance as the office. So people call in to ask about interpretation of the law. That's another element that we do. But then we also develop standards that can be followed. So briefly, that is what the office is and its mandate.
Thanks. So in the name of the office, we have Personal Data Protection Office. According to the Act, what is personal data and what is not personal data?
That's a very good question. As we all know, data can be beyond personal. So we can start with something to help you properly understand the logo of our office. Unfortunately, I don't think we have it here. Those online, if you can show, our office, the logo, let's see, it has 3 elements to it. Unfortunately, those here, if you can visit our website, pdp.go.ug, you can see it. So if you are to know what personal data is, it starts with our logo. So our logo has lines. So we are really about data and making sure that it's protected. That's why it has a shield. And not just about any data, but personal data. So those 3 elements, when they are fused, it forms a caricature of a human. So personal data is any data from which an individual you can be identified. This could be as simple as your name. That's why I'm Dr. Martin. Because we are different individuals. But then it could also be what we call assigned numbers, such as your phone number, because the phone number is unique to you. And then we have the national ID number, tax identification number. So those assigned numbers from which you can be traced as an individual. Then we also have other forms of data, such as your academic qualifications. Here we are in an academic setting. We all know that even if you do group coursework, do they give you an award certificate that says second upper group A? Do they? At graduation, do they? Or maybe things could have changed. They don't, because an award is given to an individual. So that is also personal data, your academic qualifications. Then we also have what we also call special personal data. Why it's called special? Because it's sensitive in nature. If it is mishandled, then an individual, you can actually experience greater harm, such as your tribe, because tribe is very key in our setting. You know, it can be used to discriminate against you. Someone may say maybe because, I'll give actually an example from an MP. There is an MP who talked about she got a job. Then later on at induction, they were taking them through. So someone asked her where she comes from. So then she said she was from a particular region within northern Uganda. So the person was very shocked. It was one of those underrepresented regions in the country. So she lost the job eventually, social discriminated. So sensitive data is information whereby it's sensitive in nature. If a person misuses it, there's greater impact on you. The other is religious, then your financial information. So generally that is personal data, but that's a form where you can directly be identified. Now there are forms of personal data where even if you can't be directly identified, but it's combined with other sets of data, then it can also be a personal data. I'll give an example of where you stay. Of course, you have neighbors. Someone tells you, you know, I stay here. That cannot be personal data. But if that data, such as a person delivering for Jumia something to you, it's combined with other forms of data, your order, possibly your number, then they can tell that actually they'll deliver this to Martin. So that's another example of personal data. But you also ask what is that?
Yes.
So that is very important. Now, the law only protects personal data. And I need to add living individuals. So if a person is deceased, there's another branch of law that covers it. So personal, what is in personal data? It could be any information from which you can't be identified, starting with anonymized data. Now, when you remove elements of from which an individual you can be identified, then that data, it becomes anonymized. It's not personal data. But I need to underscore that it's very hard to completely anonymize data because it can always be traced back to that person. So that should be used with caution. Then the other is the aggregated data. Now, if data is put in a summarized form, they get to know, you know, they're coming up with a report, how many students graduated, how many people are undertaking, age brackets put in such a form. Clearly, that's not personal data. Then, since we are here in this environment with data scientists, the other example, which should be very familiar to you, is what we call the synthetic data. Now, for the synthetic data, you know, it's generated programmatically, but it can resemble the personal data, but it's actually used that can be used for training algorithms, other AI systems. So that doesn't amount to personal data. So those are the main ways through which you can define what is personal and what isn't.
Okay, thanks. Maybe just to add, you also have like sensor data from sensors, you know, it can also be non-personal. Okay, so the other question is, you've talked about someone being denied of a job because of, you know, because of the tribe. Can you give us other real life cases where how that can paint a picture of how bad these harms can be if someone is able to access your personal data and use it for his, you know, advantage?
Okay, that is a good example, but I need to add not just his, but
Yes.
hers as well. Okay, so, you know, we'll start with the conversation. Usually when you tell people about, most especially individuals, personal data, some people say, but I have nothing to hide. I don't know whether you've heard of that. People say, privately say, I have nothing to hide. Why should I care? So, one, I need to add that personal data, even if your data is made public, it's still personal data, doesn't lose its nature. And these harms, actually, I'll start with the physical harms, using some of the examples, the complaints that we've handled. So we received the complaint. There was a lady. She found a car tracking device placed on her car. Actually, she had taken it to the washing bay, and the gentleman who was assisting her phoned and said, did you place this? You know, you hadn't told us about this, maybe sort of like informing her. Of course, she's denied and said, clearly it's not me, there is no way I'll put it there, and it's a personal vehicle. So it was removed. She didn't mind it. She didn't take it seriously. 6 months down the road, she found another. That's when she noted and said, you know, yes.
Another one
had been fixed. That's when she said, you know, actually this could be a problem.
Yeah.
So we investigated, and we actually, when we got more evidence and established circumstances where it could have been placed, it was actually the husband that had done so. So, and of course, such a case was a tricky one to handle. She didn't want us to progress, but then at the same time, she wanted the person to be brought to book. And then, that way, it could have brought about, that psychological torture, whereby, before she even got to know who the person was, that you're actually being trapped and the person is getting your location details in real time. But for her, she was lucky. But there have been other cases, not in Uganda, in other countries where it has turned fatal, most especially with the celebrities. So people wanted to know it was a lady where she was staying, she had bought a new home. So they got to know her location details, they tracked her, and it was shared online. So people broke into her house and she was actually assaulted. So that's one of the harms whereby people, if they don't know where you are and they couldn't have gotten that information, they would have never actually experienced such a harm. Then the other are the economic harms. So this is very common. Now I'll use an example of Uganda. Two of them. So you go to a photocopier, you have your national ID. So very many of you tell the person, please help me photocopy the national ID. So then tell you, but this copy is not a clear one. Let's photocopy again. Most people do not think about what happens to the copy they leave behind, that is so-called the unclear ones. So these people, some of them usually get that information because that's all they need, and they give it to other people and they misuse it. Whether someone can pretend to be changing your passwords to your banking applications or other services, and you're locked out. Some people have actually lost money. Then another example is if you're registering for a SIM card, they ask you to register your biometrics. So they keep telling you, and these are real case scenarios, tell you press, they're like, it can't be seen clearly. Press again. Some people can even go up to 3 times. Now, what you don't know that for each time you're registering is that you're giving your information to be used for registration of another SIM card, which at times is actually used to commit crime. So, or to commit crime, or even to get into your services where, you either have registered for something and they pretend because they would have the details that they are changing, and you lose your money or other information or which of economic value to you. Of course, the last one is around reputational. So reputational personal data, an example from Kenya. So during the elections, political parties, coming up with lists of their members. It's also common here in Uganda, but Kenya it went a little bit far. So they needed to come up with this because they use some of these lists, number one, to either lobby for funding, showing that they have so many members, or generally to even send out communications. So the political party decided, which was in the opposition at the time, started registering government officials and even judicial officers. And this information leaked online. Now, to help you understand how deadly this is, imagine if, and this is just an example, the Chief Justice lists a release and is a member of NOP. And if you have possibly another person who is in security and it shows is a member of FDC. Unfortunately, with social media, people don't verify. The moment they see, their first instinct is to share and attack without verifying whether the information. So those are some of the examples of the reputational and other risks and harms that can emanate from misuse of personal data.
Thank you. And when I think about the national ID, there is a lot of information on the national ID. Your date of birth, your village, and a lot of information. So I really understand that that could actually be misused. Now, I would like to ask, because as a data scientist here in the room or those online, we may think that this Data Protection and Privacy Act is meant to stifle data sharing, because the way you're talking about the harms and the rest, it's as if it is impossible to even have data shared because of those risks. Would you, speak to that?
Well, we keep hearing that. First of all, the law does not stop data sharing from the word go. It's conditional. It says, you can share data as long as you do it responsibly within the presence of the law. Data sharing is done for a number of reasons. It could be number one, I'll start with government. So government, NERA, we have the national database. So that NERA data is needed by so many parties, to verify, maybe to also confirm if the information they have is accurate. So people definitely, NERA in its position needs to share that data. But the law says if you're to share that data, have certain safeguards in place. So you make sure, number one, that you're transparent to the individuals from whom you got the information from. Letting them know, I've collected your data, but I may share it with these categories of people. And for these particular purposes. And then, even if you share with those people, make sure you have contracts with them. You let them know these are the commitments I made. Make sure that you also have them in place. The law has a requirement that where you experience a breach with the data you have, you notify. Now, if you give data to these people, or you give them access, let them know of that. So that's what we are thinking, because if data is shared, people say there is a Data Protection and Privacy Act, stops us from sharing, and then they hide, it will actually create more harm to the individuals. So the law doesn't, but we encourage people that they look into those provisions, and they're very clear that you should do it responsibly.
That brings me to the question of compliance. How do individuals or entities, what they need to do to become compliant? And how does the Personal Data Protection Office help them?
In becoming. So I'll start with the example of data sharing. There is a complaint that we received a while ago. I think it's now 2 years. It was about data sharing. So it's public information, so I'll talk about even the names of the company. It was Safe Border. So a client stopped using their services and was removing and installing the application from their phone. So they later realized that there were trackers where it was being shared with a company in America. So we, of course, was concerned. Safe Border is a ride-hailing company. I don't know if all of you know it. Helping people, get borders. So it captures your real location data in real time. At the time, when ordered, later the information, this was the person who was using it on a daily basis. And this was the person who was involved in NGO activities. So they thought, if government, the way they say, I don't know why people keep saying government. Government is not a big entity or building. We sit down and decide to do these things, but say that government could track them. Now, we did the investigations and we actually observed rather, that Safe Border was sharing with this company. It was the data analytics company. So it's to help to know, number one, when they can offer discounts, how many people use their products, but this person, to them, it was a security threat. Now, in their privacy notice, because the law says they should be open to the individuals, they had not got that up well. So one of the ways through which, going back to your question on compliance, we help these entities know how they can be compliant. We came up with a report and guided them that make sure, if you're doing this, because data analytics as a business, you need it. Make sure that you have policies in place and notices that give this information and you let the individuals know. But the foundational step of compliance starts with registration. All entities, be it government, public sector, that are collecting and using personal data should be registered. why we always emphasize registration is that when we receive these complaints, at least we will know, because within the registration, they tell us the details of the data protection officer, person in charge of compliance. You can first reach out to them. Most of the complaints can be resolved at that stage. But if you're not registered, we don't know where to get you from, then these are complaints that, we go into full-scale investigations and even prosecution, which could have been avoided. So the other ways, when you're done registering, you give them compliance tools. So, you review it's called data mapping, you find out which data you collect, whether you have policies. If you don't, you give them sort of ways they can develop one. So that's one of the ways. Then training is another key element. Because these very entities are rather required to file annual compliance reports. So we ask you, did you train your staff or your contractors on your commitments, on the law and related aspects? And you have demonstration or evidence of that. So those are some of the ways through which you can monitor, rather comply. But compliance is not an event that you wake up in 2021, we are compliant. No, it's a journey. You may keep collecting more data, sharing more. So you always ask for ways through which, you come up with a sort of a program, how you can monitor it. So, but having that data protection office and registering is very key, because where we can't reach as the office, then that person makes sure that it's complied with and they have evidence in that regard.
Thank you. Yeah, so the other question would be around, maybe talk more about it, the privacy notice. I had a chance of looking at the privacy notice of Safe Border. And so basically what happens is that, like Becca says, companies are required to have this privacy notice. And I think when you're maybe installing those apps, like Safe Border, it will be the message that comes and you have to read and agree, So it will have all those details, why they are collecting the data, what they are collecting and the rest. But of course, in most cases, people don't read them. But I think it would be a good exercise for people to at least check on the privacy notice of Safe Border, and also, I don't know whether the Makerere Lab has a privacy notice. Or whether it is registered, but anyway. I mean, like he said, it is important to do these things. It can save you. Can save you a lot. Okay, so the other question I would have for you is around, could you maybe talk about some of the achievements? Because I understand you've been around for the Personal Data Protection Office was established in 20? What is the year? Was it 2019 or 2020?
I would like to get a response. Someone has said 18, another 19.
Say 19.
Because it's a process. 2019,
2020, 2021.
Because normally there is a process of, I think it is 2020, because there was a process of creating a regulation from the act, isn't it?
Yes, and to pick up from there. Yes, the law was passed in 2019, actually 2018. Then the president assented to it in 2019, February. But you see, the office couldn't be in place at that time because we didn't have the regulations to guide on how to do that. So the regulations were enacted in 2021, March. 2021. Then the office started operations in August 2021. So which makes up slightly about 2 years. So within the 2 years, I wanted to get to see if people are aware, and at least, you're not so far off.
Yeah.
So the achievement, one, passing the regulations, because of course at that time it was NITA.
Yeah.
And probably I can give a distinction that supported the Ministry of ICT. Now, passing of the laws is done by the Ministry of ICT. But NITA was supporting, so the journey that took about 5 to 7 years. So the regulations, it was one of the first achievements, and Martin will attest to this. Whenever we have these conversations, because I worked with NITA initially, if I moved to PDPO, people would ask, when are the regulations being published? So that is one of the first key achievements. And then the other, the much bigger one for the entire country, Uganda was the first country in East and Central Africa to have the data protection law enacted. So beyond that, the very first element was to create awareness. At least here you have an idea. So within the 2 years, we've been able to conduct over slightly 200 awareness sessions, on broadcast media, TV, radio, social media, with a lot of social media, then focus group discussions, something similar to this, articles in papers. Then we've also, the foundational requirement of registration. Within the 2 years, right now, we registered about 2,700 entities, data controllers and processors, those that collect and process data. Then we are receiving complaints. Now, I can't call this an achievement because it's work in progress. Solomon, we are working with them, Sunbird AI. Now, with this awareness, it drove people to know that the office actually exists. So we received about, I think as of today, we are at about 6,500 complaints. So these complaints, they come through SMS, feature phones, and then the portal, walk-in, ones that come to our offices on Google bypass. So we said, okay, it looks like, people are starting to understand what the law is about and what we do. Because I remember when we went live with the portal, we were supported by one of the UN agencies, UNCDF, to develop the portal. Within about two weeks to 4 weeks, we went from, at that time, I think we had like 5 complaints to 1,000. So, but then we said, okay, we have these complaints. Now we needed to understand. Now when we partnered, Global Pulse Lab introduced us to Sunbird AI to understand these complaints, because the law gives us timelines within which we're supposed to respond. So, of course, we try to do it manually. It was a lot of work. We are thin on the ground. There is no way it was possible. So with the partnership, we're able to use AI. Now, when we started using AI, we realized that actually giving a rough estimate, over 95% of the complaints were not related to data protection and privacy. So we started wondering, okay, what is it? And the complaints keep increasing. Is it that, the message is not clear? Because I've told you we've done over 200 awareness sessions. So we had to think of our approach. Then we noted that, one, it was very clear that almost everyone that was complaining wanted to raise a concern about a government agency. So it got to show that people maybe didn't have a clear channel where to raise their conflict, and now they have one. Then, and still about government agencies, we realized still from that data that close to about 80% that were complaining about government, it was about a particular government agency. Fortunately, I will not reveal the details. So then, and later when we see the complaints, they were still related to data around access, but not straightforward dealing with, data protection. So we engaged the data protection officer and we told them, okay, we're going to come to you. I think we have an issue here that needs to be addressed. And then the others, that were complaining about telecoms and all that, it was something to do with data, which, from the analysis, realized that people know that it's about raising concerns. Of course, the few who are complaining beyond the scope, really interesting complaints. The others which are beyond the scope of really about either money, something related to government still, or money getting them from sugar mummies and all that. So the analysis helped us, and in our communication, now we started being a bit more refined, for people to get to know. And some of those complaints, those that are relevant to that particular area, now it has improved. So it's one of the very big achievements, because we didn't want people to think that, when you complain to government, you never get feedback. So that season, because as humans, it will take us close to a month, but within it takes us how long? Receiving. Second. Exactly. So you can be able to quickly make that, get back to the person who tells them, this is beyond our scope. So that has really been a very big achievement, whereby even if you're in on ground, you can use tools to be able to give people feedback. Then the other achievement, it has really been to do still with the enforcement. It's very key. We met with the director CID, assigned us a police officer. We talked to the director of public prosecutions. We have the prosecutor. That is key. Some countries have been around for long, not to compare apples and oranges, but they told us that the requests we've been able to get within these 2 years, they've been around for over 15 years, they haven't gotten it. So that's an achievement on our end. It will really help us, with the enforcement. Then, of course, the other has really been around, the collaboration is key. Now, when we work with other partners, government agencies, those that have bigger numbers, messages around compliance are able to drive it. They include it in their licensing requirements. National Lottery Regulatory Board, UCC, Bank of Uganda. So that has really been key. But then the other is the individuals, because the last one I'll end with, which is one of our biggest achievements, is change of behavior. If we wake up and realize that people haven't changed their behavior, individuals don't know that privacy is a serious issue, and people still talk about, I have nothing to hide, then wouldn't have made any achievement. So on social media, we are big on social media, we receive complaints, whereby you see individuals taking it up saying, this one shouldn't be doing this. There was another government agency that went to investigate or asking for lots of information. People push back and say, the Data Protection and Privacy Act. First of all, are you registered? Who's your DPO? So they are put to book and they thought about their processes. Another person was in a bank, picking up an ATM card. Person had moved out for lunch. They left them with a file that had, where to sign. It had other people's details who had come to pick up cards. Then they say, no, this is wrong. Calling PDPO. So that's one of our biggest achievements, whereby what we do, has been replicated with the thousands of people out there, and they are holding these organizations to account. Is something that we believe will continue producing more results.
I remember I saw a video shared by someone who was having issues with cafe javas.
About the rat.
Yeah, about the rat. And at least you would see people were aware, they were asking, about all this. So I think we shall open up for discussions. I would encourage people online to send in questions if they have, but also we can also have questions from the audience. We have a chance that Mr. Baker Birikuja is here. He's a very busy guy, but we are fortunate. So let's make good use of this time to ask questions around the office, around data privacy. So this is the time. Okay, so I think there are some questions online. Okay. Yeah, so here, Becca, there are some questions. So saying getting access to real data in Uganda is expensive and close to impossible. For development of data experts and the data industry in Uganda, how does law protect our data, but also allow sharing of data for development of the data industry and data experts in Uganda?
Okay, one, beyond the law, good enough, there is an initiative that UN Global Post Lab is championing with the Minister of ICT, the Uganda National Data Strategy. So we've seen with other countries that have such a strategy is that it creates beyond just personal data, creates pillars that, can be relied on, how to get value, how to work on skill sets, and then mindset change in these organizations that are data producers. So, and of course it has, a pillar around trust and all that speaks to the Data Protection and Privacy Act. So that's one of those. Still a draft. So for now, we are working with the act, and then when that strategy is in place, of course, it will mirror, for Uganda not to be in isolation, the African Union data policy framework, because it's speaking to directly what it's saying, because it's a big problem. You get it. So this strategy, when it's aligned with that, in the East African community, is thinking about something of that kind, it will really help. So the ministry will champion by ensuring that, these data producers, at least they have data protection officers, but if they can also have data scientists or those that can manage, it would greatly help. So it's a journey, but at least those are some of the plans where what is asking can be addressed.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Becca, for also highlighting that the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, together with UN Global Pulse and other partners, are working on a national data strategy. So issues of data sharing will be looked at, issues of building trust, issues of awareness, and so on. The other question is, does the Personal Data Protection Office have projects open to the public? Could be differential privacy or federated learning projects?
Okay, those are some of the privacy enhancing technologies. We do not have them as projects. But what I can add, and there is a project funded by the World Bank. We'll have one of the projects here will be gazetting. Gazetting is just really publishing within the government newspaper. How many people have read the government gazette? Anyone have you ever seen it?
Is it online?
Only one person? The other person has seen you're in big trouble.
Is it online?
Because it is the official government newspaper. Anything that is published there, second as that you've read. So if none of you has, please, and it's only 5,000. Or if they say you don't say only, it's 5,000. Because the other say 5,000. So going back to your point of the project, so the law requires us to publish those standards, those that talk about, some of those techniques that he has been talking of. So that will be dealt with, but that will be probably in about a year or so. How the public can participate, I don't know in which way he was asking, but of course we'll be hiring a consultant to help us develop those. So that will be public participation. But then the other could be for the general public. We'll be having a consultative workshops so they can provide feedback.
Okay.
Sorry, that was for projects.
Yeah, so you was asking whether there are some projects at the Personal Data Protection Office where people can get engaged. Yeah, but I think, okay, the collaboration that you guys have with Sandbird is not a project, but it is something that, where, AI is trying to, support your work. Maybe he meant, also projects like that. Then does the law cover online services that are operational in Uganda, but do not have services in Uganda?
Yes, the law is very clear. Section 1 says it applies to anyone, even if you're not resident in Uganda and you're collecting and using individuals who are resident in Uganda's data, it applies to you.
Yeah, and just also to mention that among there are some companies that are international that don't have offices here that are registered. They're registered.
There it is.
Mm.
Maybe I could go.
Yes.
For the academic setting, are there clearly stipulated guidelines from the Personal Data Protection Office regarding how research should be carried out in terms of data collection, where the data collection has data subjects who fall into the personal data category? So, for example, guidelines on how such academic groups can go about attaining IRB, carry out that research.
That's a very good question. Yes, the law is alive to that fact. Because the way research is done, you can correct me, I'm not a doctor, and an academician. So is if you need to, let's say, conducting a study, you definitely need data. So you approach a person a data producer or controller who originally collected that data, and you'd like them to share it for identified purposes. So the law says that data may be shared with that person for the research purposes. It's very clear on that. But it further requires that person that originally collected the data in their privacy notice to include that they may share the data they're collecting with you with individuals, organizations for research purposes. But that doesn't mean if the data is rather shared with that person or organization, they shouldn't comply with other principles of the law around preserving the privacy. So make sure that when it's shared with you, you keep it secure, you don't further share it, you won't use it in a way that will harm a person's privacy. But in short, yes, the law covers it. It's what we call further processing, called further use.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. In terms of capacity, human resource, and budget, how comfortable is PDP that area to cover the entire nation?
Are you giving us a funding proposal?
President would be this way.
Martin is laughing hard because he knows the answer. Okay, one, I'll start with the human resources. We are not few, rather many, we are really few. Permanent staff, we are only 5. Yes. Support staff, there are few, but in a human resource, they only count permanent staff or contractual. So, but at least those few, they are well skilled, certified in data protection, information security, because data protection and privacy is mainly technical and legal, what you call IT information security. So those certifications are there. Because in the country, generally in Uganda, there's an association that certifies individuals. And in the country, PDPO has the most number in the country. So that goes to show you there are few, but fewer. And then there is even another, where they call a fellow in privacy. You have the skills, you have the experience, you have the technical ability. In East Africa, there are only 2. And that one is in Kenya, another is in Uganda. So the skills are there. Now, that's why, if I leave the element of human resource, that's why we use a lot of technology, because, so that people can be able to get the service without knowing how few we are. Because the registration is done online, what you're doing with you. So we use technology a lot to cover the gaps of numbers. On the budget, of course, we're not doing well. Our budget is very small. As you know, there are so many cuts with government agencies, and that's why we're leveraging a lot on partnerships and collaborations, whereby what's not covered and partners can be able to cover it. That's what we're using.
Maybe as a last question. So for the human resource, for the courses that you have at universities, is there like alignment with your skill sets that you need? Do you see a future where you have like people that have the skills current industry.
That's a good one. Yes. We did a survey, but not with academic institutions, the data protection officers, because those that register have such people. So we conducted a survey last year in November. And we noted that, we use the benchmark of certification because certification gives you the practical skills. And 90% of those didn't have a certification. So it showed us a glaring gap. So we partnered with another development partner and we are developing a curriculum for data protection. So that will help us, ensure. Now that curriculum, we want to see how to partner with universities, institutions to ensure that those particular skill sets that the office has that are required to ensure compliance can be replicated so that probably 5 years down the road, we have a well-capacitated, human resource within Uganda that can be able to speak to that.
I wanted to know whether, if I'm like in a company and then you are trying to collect data, is it a must that you have to register with BDPO?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and maybe is it for example, if you have very many companies so far, we have a good number of them that have already registered.
Already registered?
Yeah, like when they're starting, as a must, you have to register before you start.
You're asking they should register before they start?
Yeah, I feel like that would be better.
Okay, yes, that would be, but the law came in, when companies are already established. So we make it easier for them to go through the process faster. So even if they're already in operations, you can take on the registration. Maybe I need to add, please ensure that they register because the law has penalties.
Yeah.
The penalties, you can be fined or you can also be in prison. So if you don't want to get into that, or even both, please register, not even just register, comply with the other areas. Because there's even a much bigger penalty. You can be fined up to 2% of your gross annual turnover, and individuals can be in prison between 3 months to 10 years. So should be seriously.
Okay. Now we have some questions. I know our time is up, but let's try to have these questions answered. Are there procedures in place for data subjects? This is a question from Norman Angel. Are there any procedures in place for data subjects to request deletion of personal data, especially if the user stops using a service that previously collected their data for service provision purposes? And what are the procedures?
Yes, it is there within the law. Where you can ask the person to do exactly that. But a person can decline that request and they give their reasons. Those reasons should be given to you. But the person should also be aware that some data, most especially for financial transactions, organizations are required to keep it for about 10 years, in case for anti-money laundering purposes and related assets. But yes, you can. Because if the person told you they got your data to give you a product and you no longer interacting with them, then why should they keep it any longer?
Okay. This question, there's another question here from Professor Rehema Baguma. Thank you very much for this important session. How can someone go about data protection when collecting and processing data from people across African countries and beyond? So I think, if someone is collecting in Uganda and other countries, how?
For now, you need to comply with each country's law. There's no ways around it. But of course, in the future, there is a network of all regulators called the Network of African Data Protection Authorities. We converge, Uganda is a member. We are trying to come up with a common standard that in case any company, the scenario should comply with that standard, then it would be covered in Africa.
Okay. There's another question here. Could you please expound a little on what app developers need to do? I think he used validate, but I think Okay, to validate their privacy laws through your office. What are the procedures to achieving that, especially when dealing with citizens' data, say using their national ID? And is it legal to request national IDs from users to validate their identities, say in an app, a mobile app?
So the validation is in respect to that. Okay, legal is a question of the purpose, because the name is what should be legal. So if your purpose is to provide a service, that should be indicated in your privacy policy. So if you let individuals know, through a pop-up message, we need this for that, to obtain their consent, then that can be legal.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe one more question. Yes.
My question is what if this on forest studies they have the highest interaction. So my question is that what does especially finance, because finding things as young as very good for handling funds with this and prices so possible security.
You talked of youth and minors. I believe minors are not youth, right? Okay, I'll start with minors. Minors, not yet, but it's something that we can see how to do, most especially with the school setting, driving a message, but with the youth. One, at least we talk about both the master's class of computer science and undergraduate for law. At least we usually come in as guest lecturers, but even we have a privacy month in January where we celebrate data protection. We are planning to do guest lectures, reach out the youth in different institutions, to talk about this at a station or at level that they can, understand. And then Martin can confirm the spot. If we can, we are planning to work with UN Global Plus Lab, create some little videos. They have a program called Data Stories. Some videos, having individuals or even coming up with animation, talking about what privacy means for people in those segments. So those are plans. We haven't done much, but we plan to do.
Yeah, so I think we should try to conclude from here, but I would like to thank the audience, both online and physically here. Yeah, I think we shall create more time for this kind of to continue this discussion. There is a lot to share, but I would like to say that in the digital transformation roadmap, actually, data protection and data privacy is a whole pillar. With it also has a component of cybersecurity, is a whole pillar. It's interesting to read if you can get a chance of look for the for the digital transformation roadmap that was recently launched by the Ministry of ICT and national guidance. Also, Uganda has done some work on the ethical AI, and maybe soon or early next year we might have an AI governance document. But I would like to thank everyone for their time and for the engagement, for the questions, the interesting questions. I would like to end the session here. And I would like also to thank, the partners, the Sunbird AI, the Makerere AI Lab, that gave us a slot, in their weekly seminars to have this discussion, and we shall be asking for more slots such that we are able to, to increase the awareness of data privacy and also the work of the Personal Data Protection Office. So God bless you and bye.